You're gonna do that?
No,
And then, I'm gonna say, I'm gonna start here, and then I'm just gonna keep continuing and stop at the end of the page, okay?
Because I'm gonna tell you when to stop. Okay?
Oh, so I keep reading until you tell me to stop?
I'll just tap you and then you can. And I'm gonna hold the mic for you, okay? So you don't have to look at people, you could just look at the card.
Inshallah, as we wait for the chef to arrive, inshallah, we have one of our head students, Ivan. Inshallah, he's going to be reading some few ayats of the Quran, inshallah, before we get started. I'm going to be sitting next to him, but this is the first time, inshallah, reading in front of a lot of people in the mission, inshallah. This for moral support, so make time for him, inshallah.
أعوذ بالله من الشيطان الرجيم بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم إذا وقعت الواقعة ليس لوقعتها كاذبة خافضة رافعة إذا رجت الأرض رجا وبست الجبال بسا فكانت هباء منبثا وكنتم أزواجا ثلاثة فأصحاب الميمنة ما أصحاب الميمنة وأصحاب المشأمة ما أصحاب المشأمة والسابقون السابقون أولئك المقربون في جنات النعيم ثلة من الأولين وقليل من الآخرين على سرر موضونة متكئين عليها متقابلين يطوف عليهم ولدان مخلدون بأكواب وأبانيق وكأس من معين لا يصدعون عنها ولا ينزفون وفاكهة مما يتخيرون ولحم طير مما يشتهون وحور عين كأمثال اللؤلؤ المكنون جزاء بما كانوا يعملون لا يسمعون فيها لغوا ولا تأثيما إلا قيلا سلاما سلاما وأصحاب اليمين ما أصحاب اليمين في سدر مخضود وطلح منضود وظل ممدود وماء مسكوب وفاكهة كثيرة لا مقطوعة ولا ممنوعة وفرش مرفوعة إنا أنشأناهن إنشاء فجعلناهن أبكارا عربا أترابا لأصحاب اليمين ثلة من الأولين وثلة من الآخرين وأصحاب الشمال ما أصحاب الشمال في سموم وحميم وظل من يحموم لا بارد ولا كريم إنهم كانوا قبل ذلك مترفين وكانوا يصرون على الحنث العظيم وكانوا يقولون أئذا متنا وكنا ترابا وعظاما أئنا لمبعوثون أو آباؤنا الأولون قل إن الأولين والآخرين لمجموعون إلى ميقات يوم معلوم ثم إنكم أيها الضالون المكذبون لآكلون من شجر من زقوم فمالئون منها البطون فشاربون عليه من الحميم فشاربون شرب الهيم هذا نزلهم يوم الدين نحن خلقناكم فلولا تصدقون أفرأيتم ما تمنون أأنتم تخلقونه أم نحن الخالقون نحن قدرنا بينكم الموت وما نحن بمسبوقين على أن نبدل أمثالكم وننشئكم فيما لا تعلمون ولقد علمتم النشأة الأولى فلولا تذكرون أفرأيتم ما تحرثون أأنتم تزرعونه أم نحن الزارعون لو نشاء لجعلناه حطاما فظلتم تفكهون إنا لمغرمون بل نحن محرومون أفرأيتم الماء الذي تشربون أأنتم أنزلتموه من المزن أم نحن المنزلون لو نشاء جعلناه أجاجا فلولا تشكرون أفرأيتم النار التي تورون أأنتم أنشأتم شجرتها أم نحن المنشئون نحن جعلناها تذكرة ومتاعا للمقوين فسبح باسم ربك العظيم فلا أقسم بمواقع النجوم وإنه لقسم لو تعلمون عظيم إنه لقرآن كريم في كتاب مكنون لا يمسه إلا المطهرون تنزيل من رب العالمين أفبهذا الحديث أنتم مدهنون وتجعلون رزقكم أنكم تكذبون فلولا إذا بلغت الحلقوم وأنتم حينئذ تنظرون ونحن أقرب إليه منكم ولكن لا تبصرون فلولا إن كنتم غير مدينين ترجعونها إن كنتم صادقين فأما إن كان من المقربين فروح وريحان وجنة نعيم وأما إن كان من أصحاب اليمين فسلام لك من أصحاب اليمين. وأما إن كان من المكذبين الضالين فنزل من حميم وتصلية جحيم. إن هذا لهو حق اليقين. فسبح باسم ربك العظيم.
التكبير. التكبير. ما شاء الله لا حول ولا قوة إلا بالله. May Allah bless you. Allah bless your family, your mom, your dad, and your teachers. جزاكم الله خير. وصلى الله على سيدنا محمد وعلى آله وصحبه أجمعين. السلام عليكم. إن شاء الله.
Should you continue this time?
barakatuh. Inshallah, as we wait for the Imam, inshallah, he's going to continue some Q&A session.
30 seconds, inshallah. I was a bit.
أعوذ بالله من الشيطان الرجيم بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم إذا وقعت الواقعة ليس لوقعتها كاذبة خافضة رافعة إذا رجت الأرض رجا وبست الجبال بسا فكانت هباء منبثا وكنتم أزواجا ثلاثة فأصحاب الميمنة ما أصحاب الميمنة وأصحاب المشأمة ما أصحاب المشأمة والسابقون السابقون أولئك المقربون في جنات النعيم ثلة من الأولين وقليل من الآخرين على سرر موضونة متكئين عليها متقابلين.
التكبير التكبير. إن شاء الله جزاك الله خير جماعة. بهذا التكبير وصلى الله على سيدنا محمد وعلى آله وصحبه أجمعين.
Assalamu alaikum, everyone. Thank you guys for coming. Alhamdulillah, today we're blessed to be honored with the presence of Mufti Asim. He comes from Michigan and is part of an institute called Miftah Institute. Mufti Asim has basically, studied in all parts of the world actually, and mashallah completed more than just alim courses and studied at the feet of many shuyukh in India and England, and lived in Canada for up until recently, where he just moved to Michigan to be a part of Miftah. And so Miftah, just for everyone's background, is an institute dedicated to teaching courses for people who are working professionals, parents, even young adults or young kids who are growing up. And so please check them out online. They're based in Michigan, but they have hundreds of resources online as well that we can all have access to. So without further ado, Mufti Asim.
السلام عليكم ورحمة الله وبركاته. الحمد لله رب العالمين عدد خلقه ورضا نفسه وزنة عرشه ومداد كلماته. اللهم لا أحصي ثناء عليك أنت كما أثنيت على نفسك. اللهم فصل وسلم وبارك على سيدنا محمد وعلى آله وأصحابه أجمعين. أما بعد. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala has given us a deen that is powerful in so many ways. It is powerful in its teachings. It's powerful in the extent of the teachings. It's powerful in its preservation of the teachings. It's powerful in the applicability of its teachings across all parts of the world, all ethnicities, and all periods of time. In Sahih al-Bukhari, there's a narration that a group of Jewish people came to Sayyidina Umar ibn al-Khattab radiyallahu anhu, And they said that there is a verse in your book, the Quran. If this verse had been revealed to us in our book, we would have made the day of its revelation a Eid for ourselves. It would have been a day of celebration. He said, okay, which verse is that? They said, this verse, Al-Yawma Akmaltu Lakum Dinakum. Where Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala announces that today I have completed your deen for you and perfected my favors upon you and chosen Islam as the way of life for you. This final stamp of completion and perfection and selection as the only way of life acceptable to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, this was not given to any sharia before us. So Umar radiallahu anhu said, yes, I was there when it was revealed. I know what day it was revealed. I know where it was revealed. So the deen is kamil. And it will remain so until Yawm al-Qiyamah. Muslims may reside in every corner of the world. They may have every color of skin and every language. They may have every kind of background in terms of their education, their profession, their trades, their businesses. Islam is for all of them. And Islam is applicable for all of them in all circumstances of their life. It is that complete and comprehensive. The most important thing, the most crucial element, is for us to believe that the deen is complete and that we will find our solutions in the deen. And in order to find our solutions in deen, we don't have to modify the deen itself. The deen cannot be modified. One of the great trials that people of various religions fell into is the trial of their religion not being able to keep up with the times. And people becoming turned off because the religion was not, they felt the religion was not keeping up with the times. So as a response to that, they modified parts of their religion. They modified teachings, they modified scriptures, they reinterpreted scriptures. Sort of like their own kind of ijtihad in their religion. And this continued and continued until you ended up with a situation where in many circles, the proponents or the claimants of the religion had very little of the original religion left. What they have is a version that they call that religion. One of the reasons why Islam is so powerful is that it does not need that because it is already complete. Our job is more understanding how Islam applies to us in any given situation. This is our task. Now, let's talk about a couple of things. The first thing is that the akhlaq, the manners and character and set of behaviors upheld by Rasulullah ﷺ and taught by him are beneficial for all of humanity. And of course, the one who adopts those akhlaq will benefit more than anyone else. And like we spoke about earlier today in Jum'ah, that akhlaq are inseparable from iman itself. And akhlaq are not just meeting people with a smile. That's a part of akhlaq. It's a form of sadaqah, to meet somebody with a smile, to meet somebody cheerfully. This is a part. But akhlaq do not stop there. It's not that we meet people cheerfully with smiling faces and then we're harboring ill feelings inside. Whether it's animosities, jealousies, dislike and hatred, or any of those things that have been identified in our deen as negative, detrimental, toxic. And to have that set of behaviors and to have that set of attitudes is a part and parcel of Iman itself. That's why the Prophet ﷺ said, لا يدخل الجنة من كان في قلبه مثقال ذرة من الكبر. A person who has even a speck of arrogance inside, pride, will not enter into Jannah. The person could be a very devoted worshipper, but Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala will not allow him to enter into Jannah until he's first cleansed of that element of pride that they have carried with them throughout their life and they have left this world with. Sahaba radiallahu anhum were very worried. They said, O Prophet of Allah, sometimes we like to have nice clothes, nice shoes. Is this also a part of pride? He said, alayhi salatu wassalam, Inna Allah jamilun yuhibbul jamal. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is beautiful and He admires beauty. But let me tell you, what is that kibr that stops a person from entering into Jannah? Al-kibru bataru al-haq wa ghamtu al-nas. Kibr is when a person refuses to acknowledge the truth when the truth is presented to them. Either because it doesn't fit with their narrative of events, it doesn't correspond to their outlook on a certain thing, or they said something incorrectly and they don't want to back down, even after being told that what they said was incorrect. After doing something wrong, when they are told that it's wrong, to not accept it, to continue to deny it. That is kibr. The thing that stops a person from accepting that what I did was wrong. This is kibr. And the other element of kibr is ghamtun nas, where a person looks down at others. They look down at others. They consider others to be less than them for any reason. Because this person is not as educated as I am. This person is not as wealthy as I am. This person is not from the kind of family that I am. This person does not have what I have in terms of possessions. Because this person, for any reason, even for religious purposes, where a person says, this person is less than me because I do more, I pray more, I fast more. So therefore, I am better, or I am superior, and they are less than me. So it was identified as a crucial element that a person must get rid of in order to enter into Jannah. And what is kibr? It's an attitude. So there are certain attitudes that have been identified as very, very detrimental. So it becomes our responsibility to rid ourselves of that attitude if we want to move forward in the sight of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. And like this, I'm just using this as an example. There are many, many examples. The retaliatory attitude, where if someone did something to me, now I have to retaliate. I have to get my, whether it's revenge, or I have to get even, or at the very least, I'm not going to treat them nicely anymore. Once, a group of people came to the Prophet ﷺ, and they said, O Prophet of Allah, our tribe has been afflicted with severe drought and famine. And they're all new Muslims. And we're afraid that if we don't help them out, they might leave Islam from the same door that they entered into Islam. Is there something we can do for them? So the Prophet ﷺ turned to Ali radiallahu anhu and said, what do we have in Baytul Mal? He said, O Prophet of Allah, we've already spent everything that we have. There's nothing there currently. So there was a person who saw this as an opportunity. He observed this going on. So he steps in and he said, I can help you out. I can help you out. And I can see that you're in dire need. Let me extend some money to you, a loan to you, and you can repay me in dates. So it's like, here's the money, you owe me dates. It's like I'm buying dates from you because I know you have the groves, you have the production. So I'll pay you in advance, and then when the time comes, you give 1 month time. In 1 month, you pay me back in this many days. The Prophet ﷺ agreed, took the money from that person and distributed amongst that tribe. Now this person was a Jewish rabbi who had been reading about the Prophet ﷺ and his descriptions. And in the description of the Prophet ﷺ, he had read that when someone acts ignorantly against him, he responds with tolerance. And the more ignorant a person becomes with them, the more clement and tolerant he becomes. He does not respond to jahl with jahl. He responds to jahl with hilm. So, deliberately, a few days before the payment was due, he sees the Prophet ﷺ sitting with his companions, and the Prophet ﷺ was just about to get up. And before the Prophet ﷺ could get up fully, he went and grabbed him by the front of the shirt, grabbed him by the collar and yanked him up. And he said, you haven't paid me, you're delaying, you guys have a reputation for not paying on time. And he said all of these nasty things. Umar radiallahu anhu was standing next to the Prophet ﷺ. He began glaring at him. That you dare to speak to the Prophet of Allah in that way? Let me sort you out. So he spoke to him and looked at him in a very threatening way. Meanwhile, when they looked at the Prophet ﷺ, they saw that he had a big smile on his face. And he says, oh Umar, this man needed to be told something else. And I also, on this occasion, needed to be told something else. What he needed to be told was that if you are asking for your repayment, ask in a nice way. And I should have been told that, O Prophet of Allah, you should pay your dues on time. Umar was puzzled. The Prophet ﷺ says, okay, now Umar, now it's your job to take this man to Bayt al-Mal and give him the dates that he is owed. And on top of that, give him a whole bunch extra because you threatened him. And the task is given to Umar radiallahu anhu himself. Very difficult. So Umar radiallahu anhu goes, he gives him the payment, and then he starts measuring out more dates. These are kilos and kilos and kilos of dates. So he says, what's all this extra for? He said, the Prophet ﷺ asked me to give you this as a compensation for standing up to you and for threatening you. So then the man said, Umar, do you know who I am? He said, no. He said, I'm Zayd ibn Sa'ana. He said, what? The Jewish rabbi? He said, yeah. He said, how could you of all people act so ignorantly? He said, this was just an exercise. It was a test. Because I had read in our scriptures the description of the final prophet. That he does not respond to ignorance with ignorance, rather he responds with tolerance. And the more ignorantly a person behaves towards them, the more clement and the more tolerant he becomes. And he says, I've seen it. And I testify that he is the true messenger of Allah. And Zayd accepted Islam. These were regular occurrences in the life of the Prophet ﷺ. In fact, ulama have compiled entire chapters of their books relating to how the akhlaq of the Prophet ﷺ and his companions resulted in people changing their outlook on Islam and coming into the fold of Islam. These are areas that require a great deal of work. It doesn't happen with just understanding the theory. The stories help to motivate. They create in us a genuine interest, a yearning to be like that. But if we do something with it, then it materializes. It materializes in the form of positive change in our behavior, in our attitude. And if we don't act on it, then it just becomes a nice story. And then the next time we hear it, we're like, yeah, I know that one. I've heard that one before. That's not what it's about. In one hadith, the Prophet ﷺ says, إِنَّمَا بُعِثْتُ لِأُتَمِّمَ مَكَارِمَ الْأَخْلَاقِ. In the other riwayah, إِنَّمَا بُعِثْتُ لِأُتَمِّمَ حُسْنَ الْأَخْلَاقِ. I have been sent exclusively so I can perfect human behavior. So perfecting human behavior, correcting human behavior, refining human behavior, elevating the standard of human behavior was one of the objectives of the Prophet ﷺ. And this is the meaning of that part of the verse where Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala repeatedly in 4 places in the Quran describes the Prophet ﷺ as يَتْلُو عَلَيْهِمْ آيَاتِهِ وَيُزَكِّيهِمْ. وَيُزَكِّيهِمْ, He purifies them, rectifies them. It's rectifying their behavior. Abu Dharr radiallahu anhu was scolding one of his slaves. And as was the culture at that time, he swore at him. And he said something derogatory about his mother. The Prophet ﷺ happened to be passing by. And he heard this. So he said, أَعَيَّرْتَ? Did you try to shame him? Abu Dharr radiallahu anhu admitted yes. He said, did you shame him with his mother? He said yes. He admitted, I made this mistake. The Prophet ﷺ said, إِنَّكَ امْرُؤٌ فِيكَ جَاهِلِيَّةٌ. You still have remnants of jahiliyyah in you. The Prophet ﷺ would not tolerate a society that has remnants of that behavior which goes against the code of ethics, the code of character that Islam brought. It's not acceptable. You may be as devout a worshipper as you want to be, but if you don't fix your akhlaq, you're just not there. So he compelled people to make an effort on themselves. Every experience in life becomes a pleasant one. Every interaction becomes a means of getting closer to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. And this person becomes a means of bringing people closer rather than pushing them away. In one hadith, the Prophet ﷺ says, "Al-mu'minu ma'lafun wa la khayra fi man la ya'lafu wa la yu'laf." A believer is someone that people can be close to, people can be well acquainted with, people can relate to. And there is no good in someone that neither can people relate to them nor can they relate to others. Getting along, it's in the context of getting along. So there are many things that come along that make us difficult people to get along with. The Prophet ﷺ wants us to address these barriers and take them down and remove them. For some people, it's anger. They have rage. They're nice people, they're great people, but when they get angry, that's it. They're impossible to get along with. They're upset about something. They disagree. For some people, it's their pride. If somebody says something that, that makes them feel compromised, that's it. They're going to arch up. For others, it's greed. For others, it's rudeness. All of these things have been identified by the Prophet ﷺ as problematic behaviors that need to be fixed. Every one of these is a symptom of a deep lying issue that is in real time, destroying the person's deen. I'll give you a couple of more examples. In one hadith, the Prophet ﷺ says that two types of greed for wealth and greed for prominence, the damage that they do to a person's deen. And he explains this through an example. مَا ذِئْبَانِ جَائِعَانِ. If two hungry wolves, two starving wolves, were sent into a herd of sheep, they could not do more damage to those sheep than a person's greed for wealth and prominence would do to their deen. Now obviously, you send two hungry wolves into a pack of sheep, they're gonna rip all of those sheep, but very few of those sheep will survive this attack. But greed for prominence, to be known, to always be acknowledged, to always be higher, to always be elevated, to always be known, and to always have more and more and more and more of wealth, this destroys a person's deen more than those two hungry wolves can destroy that herd of sheep. So these are attitudes, intentions, behaviors that damage a person's, they destroy a person's deen. In another hadith, the Prophet ﷺ, speaking about animosity, having dislike or despise, he said, وَالْبَغْضَاءُ هِيَ الْحَالِقَةُ لَا أَقُولُ تَحْلِقُ الشَّعْرُ وَلَكِنْ تَحْلِقُ الدِّينِ. Having hatred inside, having malice inside, just disliking someone, there could be a reason for it. Normally there is a reason for disliking someone, but harboring that malice inside, he said, it's like a blade. And he says in the hadith that this is not a blade that shaves away your hair. This is a blade that shaves away your deen. What are these? These are attitudes. They're sets of behavior. They're ways of looking at things. They're ways of dealing with things. The Prophet ﷺ has deemed them unacceptable. So in this is a massive, massive field for us to step into and address our own issues one by one, one by one, one by one. Of course, the opposite of that is very easy, where we pat ourselves on the back, and we look at ourselves in the mirror and say, I'm a great person. I'm just so great. I'm so good. Yes, we're all good in many ways. Every human being has good. But if we sit there congratulating ourselves over how good we are, for someone, the narrative in their mind is telling them how generous they are. For someone else, it's how kind they are. For someone else, it's how likable they are, or how friendly they are, or whatever. But if that's all we're seeing when we're looking in the mirror, and we're not looking at other aspects of our own personality that need to be addressed, if we're ignoring them, then we are ignoring an aspect of being. And that one aspect sometimes is enough to eradicate many other good things that we've done. So it is every Muslim's responsibility to first of all understand what are the guidelines that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala has set for us as a person. We know what the guidelines are for salat and zakat and siyam and hajj. What are the guidelines for a personality? What is the standard? What's the minimum standard that Islam has set for speech, for talking to people, for friendships, for relationships, for situations when we're upset, for situations when someone has mistreated us? This discussion is not to say that everything is our fault. Not everything is our fault. People will do things, hurtful things to us. But how we respond is in our control. Either we will respond in such a way that is pleasing to Allah, or it will be displeasing to Allah. And then our approach to things, how we take on things, how we tackle issues and problems. Either we will do it in a way that's pleasing to Allah or the other way. So there is great scope for us to work on ourselves. And until we do that, our iman is not complete in the sight of Allah. Our deen is not complete in the sight of Allah. Now I'm going to shift gears just a little bit to talk about some common things that we go through. And this will be beneficial, inshallah, for all of us who are parents, those who are going to be parents, for people who are in positions of responsibility at work or in the business, anyone who has subordinates, anyone who has people that are working under them or responding to them, answering to them. And I'll give you a little bit of background of why I'm talking about this. For the last few years, I was in Australia working on an educational project for Islamic schools in the West, essentially creating a system of education for Islamic schools. And during this time, we had, different tasks and different educational sort of experiments that we were conducting. So as a part of that, we invited a speaker and an educator from the States who has good experience in using storytelling in education. How to use storytelling as an effective means of educating. And as we know, storytelling is one of the most easy ways to convey a message. So this gentleman was working with a grade 2 class. And he was doing some storytelling, and then he spoke to me and he said that why is it that every time we extract a moral from the story, a lesson from the story, it's always framed in don't do something, to not do something. Tell a story, what's the moral of the story, kids? And the kids will say, never trust a stranger. Okay, Little Red Riding Hood. Another story, what's the moral? Never tell a lie. Another story, what's the moral of the story? Never cross the street until you look both ways. Like this, everything is never do this, never do this. Never be disrespectful to your parents, never. He said, why is the moral always something that you don't do or that you can't do? And why isn't the moral of the story, the lesson of the story, something that you should do? He said, I'm having trouble figuring this out. And I said, that's easy. It's because that's what we have programmed the minds of these kids to do. I said, look, when we are giving instructions to children, most of the time, the instruction is framed in don't do this. From the time the child is very small, don't touch that. Don't go there. Don't run. Don't go close to the stairs. Don't do this. Don't do this. Don't eat that. Don't go close to the stove. Everything is don't. From the time they started understanding words, most of the instructions that they receive from us are in the form of don't. And this is not something related to a community or like the Muslim community. This is global, universal. This is in all societies. That's just how we talk. Maybe that's because that's how we were taught. So we speak like that. Everything is framed in don't. And I said, so subliminally, we program these children to think that if there's anything of importance, it must be a don't. It has to be something that we can't do if it's of importance. And that's just how we've trained them. But I said, the interesting thing is, while this is our primary way of communicating instructions to our children, it's interesting to note that the human being doesn't like don'ts, especially kids. They don't like it. So he said, I'm wondering if you can come into that class and do some work with them. I said, yeah, I'd be happy to. So I went into this class. The students are generally 6, 7 years old. And so I gave them sets of phrases and I told them to choose one. Tell me, which one do you like? So, examples. Don't tell lies. Always speak the truth. Choose one. And all the kids chose always speak the truth. Don't be scared. Be brave. Choose one. They all chose be brave. Don't play over there. Play over here. They all chose play over here. Like this, I gave them probably a dozen sets of phrases, one negatively phrased, one positively phrased. Essentially, they were saying the same thing, and I just asked them to choose. And they were not prepped for this. I just walked into that class and started doing this. So in 100% of the cases, 100% of the kids chose the positively framed sentence or instruction. So after I did this, I asked them, tell me, why did you guys always choose that one? How come you never ever chose the one that said don't? And I'm getting the kids now to speak their minds. So now the kids start speaking. So one says that when you said don't lie, it almost sounded like you thought I was a liar and you were trying to stop me from lying. And it didn't feel good. When you said speak the truth or always speak the truth, it felt like you thought I was a truthful person and you were just reminding me to keep telling the truth. One said, when you said don't play there, it sounded like you didn't want me to play. And there was just an excuse. But the main message was you didn't want us to play. When you said play over there, the message was, hey, you guys can play, you're allowed to play. Just keep your play in that area. And that was fine, we wanted to play. One little boy said, when you said don't be scared, it was like you thought I was a coward. That I was already scared. Didn't feel good. And when you said be brave, it was empowering. Like you had the courage and the faith in me, the confidence in me, that I could be a brave person, and that made me feel really strong. Now this gentleman who did the first exercise and the classroom teacher were at the back observing, and they were just blown away. They said, wow. So when we got together, I said, this is the fitrah of the human being. These are innocent children. They're speaking what their heart is telling them. And that's human nature. And adults are like that too. If I walk into your masjid, mashallah, the brothers brought me in. You know, on the way here this morning, I was asking them, tell me about the activities of the masjid, tell me about the community. And you know, the brothers giving me all of this wonderful information. We do this, we do this, we do this, and this is happening, this is happening. Imagine if the way he explained it to me was, well, in our masjid, we don't do this, and we don't do this, and we don't do this, we don't do this. And when they're bringing me in, don't do this in our masjid, and don't do this, and don't do this, I'd be like, what in the world is this? I don't want to be here. What is it that I can do? What is it that you do? That's what I'm interested in. Not in what I can do and what you don't do. That's human nature. Now let me relate this to the Prophet ﷺ. Umar ibn Abi Salama radiallahu anhu is the stepson of the Prophet ﷺ. He is the son of Salama radiallahu anha. So when Salama radiallahu anha married the Prophet ﷺ, she had 4 kids. Umar was one of them. So he grew up in the house of the Prophet ﷺ, watching him, eating with him. So he says, when I was a little child, and we were sitting at the sufra eating, as a child would do, my hand would wander everywhere. كانت يدي تطيش في الإناء. My hand would just wander everywhere, just, you know, just making a mess of everything. Take something from here, take something from there, scatter food here, this. And using both my hands. He said, the Prophet ﷺ said to me, Ya ghulam, سم الله وكل بيمينك وكل مما يليك. The son, say Bismillah. Eat with your right hand. Eat from the side closest to you. That's it. The lesson stayed with Umar radiallahu anhu, Umar ibn Salama, his whole life, and he remembered it. Now, if it was us, we'd probably say, hey, don't eat from there. Don't make a mess. Don't eat with your left hand. Don't do this, don't do this. There is no don't. It's just an instruction. The child needs instruction, need to be told how to do something. Just give them that, and they'll take it. But when you add the don't factor unnecessarily, well, the first thing that the child has to process is this don't, and they don't like it. They have to get over the fact that they don't like the message. And then after that is the message. Am I going to do it or not? It decreases the likelihood of them following our instructions. So, this is one thing that is overused. There is a time and a place for telling somebody to stop doing something or to not do something. There's a time and a place for that. But if this is our primary means of communication, you know what? Every single time we're distancing them away from those instructions and distancing them away from ourselves. And that is where the real damage occurs. So this is one thing that's overused. The other that is overused is when we see someone doing something or saying something, we often say, why are you doing that? Why'd you do that? Why didn't you do that? Why? And now when it comes to parents and kids, the why is our adult mind trying to figure out the reason behind why the child did such and such thing, why the children acted in such and such way, why they said such and such thing. But the child's mind is feeling cornered. And their mind is telling them, I'm being told off. And I'll tell you something, there is no real answer to that why, by the way. Because the child most likely doesn't know the why. They don't know why, they just did it. When we force them and we corner them and say, why? Tell me why you did that. They don't have an answer. And you will see one of three reactions in that situation. One of three things will happen. When we put a child on the spot, immediately after we've learned that they've done something, we put them on the spot and demand a why, they'll respond in one of three ways. Number one, if they're clever, they'll tell us what we want to hear. I was being a bad boy. I wasn't listening to instructions. They'll tell us what we want to hear. Number two, they'll just make something up. Oh, my sister told me to do it. She made me do it. He made me do it. Well, he did it first. They'll just make something up. And the third is they'll clam up and they won't say anything. And you'll see their body language. Their eyes will be low. Their body will kind of retract and shrink. Their shoulders will hunch up. And they're just quiet. And you keep saying, I'm telling you, talking to you, tell me why. No answer. You'll see these three responses. One of them, almost every single time you ask why or why didn't you? Why did you? Why didn't you? Why did you? Why didn't you? You'll get one of these responses. These are the three most common responses. Ultimately, what's happening with the child in that moment is they want to get out of that situation. And they're going to do whatever comes to their mind as a solution for getting out of that situation. It's a fight or flight moment with the child. They're not interested in answering our question. They're just as bewildered as we are about the real answer because they don't know. But for them, this is a very unpleasant experience and they just want to get out of it. And they will do whatever it takes to not be in that situation the next time. In other words, they won't always do the right thing in the future, but they'll just do it in a way that we won't find out. Anything to not feel that confrontation, the heat of that moment, the pressure of that moment, that is so uncomfortable and it doesn't do anything for the child. Now again, let me take you back to the Prophet ﷺ. We have a very large test sample here. Anas ibn Malik radiallahu anhu says that خدمت النبي صلى الله عليه وسلم 10 سنين. In another riwayah, in the riwayah of Muslim, خدمت النبي صلى الله عليه وسلم 9 سنين. I served the Prophet صلى الله عليه وسلم for 10 years or for 9 years. Now, that's a long time. That's essentially the whole duration of the Prophet ﷺ's life in Medina. Anas radiallahu anhu, his mother brought him to the Prophet ﷺ, brought him to the Prophet ﷺ when he was 10 years old. So he kind of grew up with the Prophet ﷺ. Pre-adolescence, then adolescence, teenage years, it was all while he was doing various tasks for the Prophet ﷺ. His mother had requested this. Now, of course, on many of those occasions, he says, I slipped up. Sometimes I did something that I wasn't supposed to do. Or I didn't do something that I was supposed to do. So in all of those 10 years, the Prophet never said, لِشَيْءٍ صَنَعْتُهُ لِمَا صَنَعْتَهُ أو لِشَيْءٍ لَمْ أَصْنَعْهُ هَلَّا صَنَعْتَهُ. Not once did he say, for something that I did, that I shouldn't have done, why'd you do it? Or to something that I didn't do that I was supposed to, why didn't you do it? He never addressed me in this way. He never put me in that situation. 10 years is a long time. And he says, I used to make mistakes. Once he relates one story that once the Prophet ﷺ sent me out on a task, on an errand. So I went out, and then he saw kids playing in the street. He got busy with them, right? He started playing, got distracted. And then he said, while I was playing, I felt a hand on my shoulder. And I froze. And I said, oh no, that's when I realized that, I was supposed to do that thing. And he said, I was so scared. And I looked up, and it was the Prophet ﷺ. And he had a big smile on his face. And that was the end of it. The lesson was learned. The moment the Prophet ﷺ put his hand on his shoulder, the lesson was already done. There's no need to say anything. So these two things are overused. The don'ts, the constant don'ts, and the why not, why not, why not. It makes the children distant from us. Because as I said, they're going to try to avoid that conversation the next time. You tell me, have we opened up channels of communication with our kids or have we pushed them away? And imagine if this happens over a period of 10 years, 15 years, 20 years, by the time they are ready to make their own decisions and move forward in life. If they've had a lifetime of this, you know what? They're not going to be eagerly calling us and being in touch with us because the human mind wants to avoid those types of circumstances that are unnecessary and uncomfortable. And in doing so, we may just push away an entire generation away from us. And imagine if the whole of deen is framed in don'ts. What's religion going to look like to that child as they grow up? And I've heard kids talking like this. In Islam, we don't do this, we don't do this, we don't do this. To them, Islam is just a list of don'ts. Islam is a list of do's. It's things we do that make us a Muslim. And because we do certain things, there are certain things that we stay away from. The things we stay away from are there so we can continue doing what we're supposed to do. Because we can't do what we do if we don't abstain from those things. But the first lesson, the primary lesson is this is what we do and this is how we do it. We do things and this is how we do those things. This is what our children need. This is what our youth need. Sometimes it feels like we've spent so much time telling our kids what not to do that we've missed out on the opportunities of telling them what they should be doing. So they walk away with a whole list of don'ts, but they don't have the information, the knowledge of what to do and how to do it. So we need a shift in our homes, in our lives, with our families. And this is applicable, like I said, to anyone in any setting, anyone who has people that have to answer to them, or somebody, or a team that they're running, a manager, anyone of that type of position will benefit from this lesson. And ultimately, people will start coming closer to us because people do need direction. People will admit that, yeah, they need to know what to do and they need to know how to do it. If we are able to convey that effectively, not only will we get our message across, but we'll get a lot more than hesitant compliance. Because right now, a lot of what we're working with is just, it's compliance, but it's filled with hesitations. So these are some beautiful lessons from the teachings of Rasulullah ﷺ, from the life of the Prophet ﷺ, that we can all incorporate very, very easily. It doesn't take a long time. It just takes a little bit of awareness that, okay, next time I speak to my child, I'm going to be just a little bit more aware of how I say it. Because how we say it is just as important as what we're saying. It's very important. So, may Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala give us the ability to rectify our akhlaq, to improve our akhlaq, so that we can prosper and grow in His sight and succeed in the sight of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, and also so that we can nurture beautiful relationships with all the people in our lives. And that's really what will happen if we start walking down the path of improving our akhlaq and working on ourselves to better whatever it is that we're doing. And with that, inshallah, I'll conclude my talk. Brother Zubair there has some slips of paper. If you would like to ask a question, I will request that you quickly write it down, because it gives you a chance to think about what you're asking, and also doesn't take too much time from everyone else. If you have a question, just raise your hand. He'll bring the sheet over to you, and you can write down your question. And then just ask. He has papers and he has pencils as well. So when kids make a mistake, how to make them realize that they made a mistake in the best way without asking why? Well, it depends on the circumstance. It depends what the child did. And the parent has to look at when is the best time to make them realize that it was a mistake. Is it right away? Or is it better to have a conversation later on when the parent is also calmer and the child is also calmed down? The parent has to make that call. I don't advise giving too many lectures every time a child makes a mistake, because it usually doesn't work. A lot of it becomes wasted words. But when the child makes a mistake, it is important to make them realize that, look, this is what you should have done. Sometimes a good question to ask is, was this the right way of doing things? Do you think this was the right way, or do you think there was a better way? And sometimes it's better to let the answer come from the child. So this is one technique that can be very effective. Of course, you have to swallow that sort of immediate impulse that wants you to just let it all out on the child in that moment. But sometimes it's better for the parent also just to take a breath, step back a little bit. Obviously, if the child has made a mistake, depending on the severity of the mistake, there is a time and a place to help them understand that. But sometimes, if you want the child to reflect, it's good to ask them, so what is it that you did? Get them to explain. Maybe they were trying to do something and they ended up doing something else. Give them a chance to explain what it is that we're doing. Okay, fine, this is what you did. Do you think this was the right thing to do? Or should you have done something else? Should you have done it another way? And let it come from the child. All right, what can we do to stop this in the future? So, without going into specific circumstances and scenarios, sometimes this is a helpful approach. Of course, you know your children better than anyone else. But when the children see that the parent is taking a wiser approach, they usually become more receptive. They become more interested. Okay, where's he going with this? What is she really trying to tell me? But don't overuse that, because then it just becomes, it becomes a script that they've memorized. Yes, I made this mistake. I should have done that. I didn't do that. I shouldn't do that. I won't do it again. It just becomes a script. Use it sparingly, but try to get the children to start thinking, as opposed to bearing the brunt of our displeasure, frustration, anger at that moment. This is one thing that has proven to be very beneficial. So this is a lengthy question. What if the child doesn't realize? In the case of the Prophet ﷺ putting his hand on Anas' shoulder, he realized right away. It was an instant reflection. What if the child doesn't reflect right away? Again, have a conversation with them about if they haven't gotten the message through a subtle gesture. And subtle gestures are a beautiful thing, because it doesn't put that much pressure on the child, but often they get the message. And if they don't, or they're just being stubborn, or they're being naughty, or they're just playing up on you, then sometimes just ask them, did you do such and such thing? No, I didn't. You want to do it now? And sometimes they'll know they're in trouble, but you're going easy on them, so they'll go and do it. Can you do that now? I strongly advise against making every occasion into a lecture, or we're telling them off, or we're putting them down, or we're giving them all these reminders. Don't overuse it. Try to keep conversations as simple as you can between your kids. And it's not all about me winning this argument. It's not about me as a parent walking away with the satisfaction that, yeah, okay, I really gave it to that child, and I made sure they're not going to do it again. It's not about that, because children don't respond like that. But give them a chance. Keep it simple. Keep it short. If the child doesn't get the subtle reminder, then step it up a little bit. Use a verbal reminder. But again, you're the adult in the room. So you're the one who has to step back, be calm, calculated, and don't overuse words. We overuse words. Talk too much. And it serves only to frustrate our kids, and then you'll see kids sometimes just rolling their eyes. Here we go again. It's time for Salat. It's up to you. Okay, a couple of minutes. So those are reminding me it is time for Salat. I'll just go through some of the questions quickly. I'll try to stay with the questions that are relevant to our topic. There are some general questions here. They will require more detail. Controlling impulsive behavior like anger. So, I mean, short of taking anger management classes, I would say that the first impulse to act out our anger is usually incorrect. It's usually an incorrect impulse. However, the anger is usually correct. The justification of the anger, the reason for being angry or upset is used, in the case of parents, it's usually correct. The impulse is what is incorrect. And the Prophet ﷺ has reminded us on many occasions about kadhmul ghayb. And Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala has praised those people who suppress their rage, not those who don't have anger. One of my teachers used to say, only donkeys don't have anger. Every human being gets angry. And anger from an emotional intelligence perspective, anger is a mechanism that tells us that a rule has been broken. So the justification of the anger is usually, in the case of parents towards their children, it's usually correct. It's the way we act it out that is incorrect. So controlling if my first impulse is to yell out or to scream, then that's what I need to work on. There is no substitute for working on it and suppressing it. It's about suppressing anger. And often we lose the effectiveness of our message when it's an outburst. And the child can see that this is an outburst and they're just weathering the storm. They're like, okay, I can't wait till this is over. But when that anger translates to coherent speech, a meaningful discussion, pointed questions that are actually pointing to the problem, they're indicating the problem and how to fix it, the child will respond. I think we'll keep it to that. Some of the questions they're general. They require a lengthier discussion. I don't think we'll have time for that, but perhaps in the future, inshallah, if Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala wills, we will, inshallah, bring these issues up and have a broader discussion about them. This was a very short trip. I just came in this morning and I'm leaving again very early in the morning. This is my first trip to Boston. I, mashallah, had a chance to see a glimpse of your community. Mashallah, it's a beautiful community, some great things happening. May Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala keep your masjid and your community prosperous. May Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala protect you from all evil. May Allah azza wa jalla protect your children and your future generations. And may Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala enable all of you to work together for such constructive work that enables us to produce the kind of Muslims that are needed in the world today. Our prayers are with you, and inshallah, if Allah wills, we'll meet again on some occasion. وصلى الله وسلم وبارك على نبينا محمد وعلى آله وأصحابه أجمعين وآخر دعوانا أن الحمد لله رب العالمين.
الله أكبر الله أكبر